I was 53 years old, standing on my daughter's porch in the rain, holding a garbage bag with everything I owned, and she wouldn't even open the door all the way. She cracked it maybe 6 inches. I could see half her face. The good cheekbones she got from me, the eyes she got from her father, and she looked at me like I was a stranger asking for spare change. "Mom," she said, "this really isn't a good time." It wasn't a good time. My husband of 26 years had just told me he'd been living a second life for the past 4 of them. A woman named Christy, an apartment in Raleigh, 40 minutes from our house, a joint bank account I didn't know existed. I found out on a Tuesday morning when a credit card statement came in the mail addressed to him, a card I'd never heard of. And I opened it because I open everything in this house. I always have, that's just who I am. The charges told the whole story. Restaurant I'd been to, hotel I'd never been to, a jewelry store, flowers. $312 on a random Wednesday in March for something that wasn't for me, because nothing that man spent money on in the last 4 years was for me. I confronted him that evening. I had the statement on the kitchen table. I had a glass of water because my hands were shaking and I needed something to hold. He walked in, looked at the paper, and then looked at me. And he didn't even try. That was the part that broke something inside me. He just sat down and said, "I was going to tell you." 26 years. He was going to tell me. I asked him to leave. He said it was his house too, and that's true, it was. Legally, his house too, we both knew it. We'd bought it together in 1998, a 3-bedroom in Greensboro with a yard I planted and a kitchen I gutted and refinished myself over one very long summer. I put that house together with my own hands, and he was right that I couldn't just make him leave. So I left. I know some people will say that was the wrong move. I've heard it. Believe me, I've heard it from everyone who had an opinion on my life. But I want you to understand what it felt like to be in that kitchen with that man after what I'd just read. I couldn't be in the same air as him. I went upstairs, I grabbed what I could, I stuffed a garbage bag with clothes and my medications and my laptop and the folder where I keep important documents. Birth certificate, social security card, that kind of thing. I've always kept them in one place. And I walked out. I drove to Rebecca's. Rebecca is my daughter. She's 31 and she lives about 20 minutes from us in a house she shares with her boyfriend Craig, who I have never fully warmed to. He's not a bad person. He's just the kind of person who makes everything about logistics. Every conversation eventually turns into a project plan. But she loves him and she seemed happy, and that was enough for me. I didn't call ahead. I know that was a mistake. But I was shaking and crying and driving, and I couldn't think straight enough to dial. I just drove there because she was my daughter and I didn't know where else to go. My mother passed in 2019. My father has been in memory care in Wilmington for 3 years and doesn't always know who I am anymore. I have a brother, Dennis, who lives in Phoenix, and who I talk to maybe 4 times a year. I have friends, or I thought I did. But the kind of friends you make in your 50s are couple friends, dinner party friends, not show up with a garbage bag friends. I parked in Rebecca's driveway. The rain had started maybe 10 minutes earlier, the kind of April rain that's cold enough to feel mean. I rang the doorbell. She opened the door 6 inches. "Mom, this really isn't a good time." I said, "Rebecca, your father and I are done." I left. "I need a place to stay for a little while." She looked behind her. I knew she was looking at Craig. I could feel him back there, in that house, already running the project plan in his head. She turned back to me and she lowered her voice like she was embarrassed. And she said, "We don't really have the space. They have a 3-bedroom house. Craig works from home, so one room is his office. But the 3rd bedroom, I had seen it, I had been in it, had a bed in it, a real bed, a queen-sized bed with a frame and everything. And it was just storing boxes of Craig's college things that he'd never gotten around to going through." I said, "There's a bed in the guest room." She said, "It's complicated." That was when I understood. It wasn't the space, it was Craig, it was the disruption. It was whatever version of my life they'd decided they didn't want in their house. Their routines, their evenings. I stood there in the rain for a moment. I didn't cry. I was too far past crying. I just looked at my daughter. This person I had labored for, nursed through ear infections and heartbreaks and a car accident at 19 that totaled a car and scared me half to death. And I said, "Okay." And I picked up my garbage bag and I walked back to my car. I sat in the driveway for a minute. I didn't know where to go. I drove to my brother Dennis's house. No, he was in Phoenix. There was no driving to Phoenix. I thought about calling him. I didn't. It was 2 hours earlier there, and he was probably at work. And I didn't want to explain it all on the phone in a parking lot. I thought about hotels. I looked up my bank account on my phone, while parked on a side street. We had a joint checking account. There was a little over $4,000 in it. Half of that was mine, legally. But I wasn't going to drain a joint account in the middle of a Tuesday night without understanding the consequences first. I'd heard enough stories from women at work from friends' divorces. Pulling all the money from a joint account can look bad in court. I didn't know the exact rules, but I knew enough to be careful. I took out $300 in cash from an ATM, my own money. Just $300. Just enough to get through a few days. And I drove to a Holiday Inn Express on the edge of town, and I checked in with my garbage bag, and I sat on the edge of the bed, and I stared at the carpet for a while. Then I called Dennis. He answered on the third ring, and I told him the whole thing, start to finish, and he listened. Which is one thing Dennis has always been good at. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Did you call an attorney yet?" That was Dennis. Practical. I wasn't ready for practical yet. I needed someone to just be a little bit sad with me. But I said no, not yet, and he said, "Call one tomorrow, first thing." And then he said, "You can come here if you need to. Just say the word." Phoenix. I didn't want to go to Phoenix. Phoenix felt like giving up, like moving backward, like admitting that my whole life in Greensboro had dissolved, and there was nothing left to stay for. But knowing the offer was there helped me breathe. I stayed at that Holiday Inn for 6 nights. I found an attorney on Wednesday morning. A woman named Patricia. No, wait. I'm not going to use her real name. She was referred to me by someone at my old job, and she was sharp and direct, and she told me what I needed to know. The house was marital property. The joint accounts would be divided. I had a right to a portion of my husband's retirement account, because I had supported him through 26 years of a marriage that had allowed him to advance his career while I worked part-time for 12 of those years, so that someone could be home with Rebecca. That history mattered legally. What felt like sacrifice was actually, in the language of divorce court, a contribution. She also told me something I wrote down and kept. Document everything. Every account, every asset, every login you can access right now. I spent that Wednesday going through every piece of financial paper I could find in my email, in the files I'd backed up to my laptop, in the online portals I had credentials for. I found the credit card. I found another one. I found a PayPal account with a balance I hadn't known about. I sent it all to my attorney. I was 53 years old, and I was learning my own financial life for the first time, and I was furious, and I was also, underneath everything, oddly awake. Like something that had been asleep in me for a long time had cracked an eye open. I knew I couldn't stay at the Holiday Inn. At about $89 a night, 6 nights had already cost me over $500, and I needed to be careful. I looked at apartments, but I didn't have income. I'd been working part-time as an administrative assistant at a dental office. 22 hours a week, because 22 hours a week had been enough when we were married. It was not enough to qualify for most apartment leases. I called Rebecca. I hadn't spoken to her since the night she didn't open the door. 5 days. She let it go to voicemail. Then she called back that evening, and her voice had that careful quality it gets when Craig is nearby. She said she was sorry for how things went the other night. She didn't say she was sorry for what she did, just for how things went, which is a meaningful distinction. She asked how I was doing. I said, "I need to stay somewhere while I figure this out. I'm not asking to move in forever. I'm asking for 4 to 6 weeks." There was a pause. I could hear her breathing. I thought about the fact that I was the one who taught her to breathe through hard things. I used to tell her, when she was little and scared about something, "Just breathe. Bug. Just breathe through it," she said. "Let me talk to Craig." Craig's answer came back through her the next morning in a text. They were worried about the disruption to Craig's work schedule. They wanted to support me, but they also had to think about their own boundaries. They hoped I understood. Their own boundaries. I put my phone down on the hotel bedspread and I looked at the ceiling, and I thought, okay then, if that's how it is. I moved into a room I found on Craigslist, a woman in her 60s renting a furnished room in her house in High Point, about 20 minutes away. "Harriet," She was a retired school teacher and she had 2 cats, and she charged me $650 a month, which I could manage if I was careful. She didn't require a full lease, just a month-to-month agreement and first month up front. It was the smallest space I had lived in since my college dorm. There was a twin bed, a dresser, a window that looked out on her side yard, and a small desk. It was enough. It was a room with a door that locked, and that was what I needed. I started applying for full-time jobs the same week. I hadn't worked full-time since Rebecca was in middle school. My resume had gaps and I knew it. I spent evenings on it, trying to make 12 years of part-time administrative work sound like what it actually was. Competent, detail-oriented, the person who kept things running. I applied to every dental office, medical office, law firm, and insurance company within 15 miles. I applied to things I was overqualified for. I applied to things I might be underqualified for. I sent 43 applications in the first 3 weeks. I heard back from 7. I interviewed at 4. I got 1 offer. A full-time receptionist position at a multi-practice medical group in Greensboro. $38,000 a year, benefits included. It wasn't glamorous, it was exactly what I needed. I took it. I started on a Monday morning in May. I wore the blazer I'd packed in my garbage bag because apparently, when your life falls apart, you have the foresight to grab one blazer. I drove to work in my car, which was mine, paid off, titled in my name. I sat down at a desk, I answered phones, I scheduled appointments. I filed things, I was good at it. I had always been good at it. What nobody tells you about starting over at 53 is that it's exhausting, in a way that's different from any other exhaustion. It's not just the physical tiredness of working full days when you haven't in years. It's the mental weight of rebuilding everything at once. The finances, the legal process, the housing, the social world, all of it at the same time. All of it requiring attention you have to produce from somewhere even when you feel completely empty. But underneath the exhaustion there was something else. Something small and stubborn. Every evening I sat at that little desk in Harriet's house and I worked on things. I started a budget, a real one, my attorney's advice, to document my expenses for the divorce proceeding. I opened a checking account in my name only. I applied for a credit card in my name only, the first one I'd ever had that wasn't a joint card. And I was approved for it, which felt like a very small miracle. I started a savings account. I set up an automatic transfer of $50 every payday, then $75, then $100. The divorce took 11 months. My ex-husband, I'll call him what he was, contested things he had no real right to contest. He claimed I had diminished our marital assets by taking $300 from the ATM. His attorney actually put that in writing. $300, from an account that had $4,000 in it, was characterized as asset dissipation. My attorney, to her credit, laughed when she read it. But we still had to respond to it, which cost time and money. In the end, the settlement was fair. I received my share of the equity in the house. We sold it, split the proceeds. I received a portion of his 401(k) through what's called a QDRO, a Qualified Domestic Relations Order, which sounds complicated but basically means the court orders a retirement account to be divided between spouses. I had never heard of a QDRO before this year. I know what one is now. I moved out of Harriet's and into a 1-bedroom apartment the month after the divorce finalized. It was mine, my name on the lease, my deposits, my first real home of my own, which is a strange thing to say when you're 54 years old. I had been 53 when I stood on my daughter's porch in the rain. I was 54 when I walked into my own apartment for the first time with a key that only I had. I furnished it slowly. I didn't have money to furnish it all at once, so I bought things one at a time. A real bed first, then a couch from Facebook Marketplace, gray good condition $50. A kitchen table I found at a consignment shop, a lamp, a rug. I made it mine piece by piece over about 4 months, and somewhere in that process I realized I was the happiest I'd been in a very long time. I need to tell you about Rebecca. She reached out to me about 3 months after everything started. She texted first, a long text. The kind people write when they feel guilty, but don't quite know how to say it directly. She said she'd been thinking about things. She said she knew it must have been hard when she didn't let me stay. She said she hoped I knew she loved me. I sat with that text for 2 days before I responded. I wasn't trying to punish her. I was trying to figure out what I actually wanted to say, because I'd learned by then that saying, The first thing that comes into your head is not always the same as saying what you mean. I called her instead of texting back, and I said, I know you love me. And what you did on that porch hurt me in a way that's going to take me a while to work through. I'm not walking away from you. But I need you to understand that when I needed you, you chose Craig's comfort over my safety. And I'm going to need time. She cried. I didn't, which surprised me. We talked for an hour. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years, maybe ever. She said things she'd never said about how she'd been afraid to need me during her teenage years because I'd seemed so focused on keeping the marriage working. I said things I'd never said about how scared I was at her age and how I didn't know how to let anyone see that. We had a real conversation, two adults, and it was hard and it was worth it. We're better now. Not all the way healed. I don't think it happens that fast, but better. She came to my apartment for dinner last spring, and sat at my $50 couch and ate the lasagna I made and told me the place looked really good. And then she said, kind of quietly, You seem different, Mom. I said, Different how? She thought about it, she said lighter. I think that's right. I think I am lighter. 14 months after that night in the rain, my ex-husband reached out through a mutual acquaintance to ask if I'd be interested in selling him my portion of a small investment account that hadn't been included in the original settlement proceedings. Something his attorney had apparently overlooked. The account had done well in the months since the divorce. He was offering to buy me out at the original valuation, not the current one. I forwarded the inquiry to my attorney. She took care of it. I received the current valuation, not the original. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about him. That was the other thing nobody told me, that the anger eventually gets quieter. Not gone, just quieter, more manageable, like background noise in a busy office that you stop noticing after a while. I used to think I'd want to see him diminished somehow. I don't really care anymore. That part of my life is finished and this part is still unfolding, and I'm much more interested in what's ahead. My salary is $41,000 now. I got a raise 8 months in. I have a savings account with more money in it than I've ever had in my name alone. I have a 401(a) I started contributing to through work, which I had never done independently before, because I always thought that was the kind of thing managed at the household level. I have a credit score that went up 47 points in 12 months because I pay my one credit card on time every month. I have an apartment that is mine. I have a job I'm good at. I have a daughter I'm slowly, carefully building something new with. And I have this. The memory of sitting in a Holiday Inn in the rain, 53 years old, with a garbage bag and $300, and deciding that it was not the end of my story. It was a terrible night. I won't romanticize it. But something in me, something tired and furious and stubborn, decided that I was not finished. I keep a note in my phone now. I started it that night in the hotel, sitting on the edge of the bed staring at the carpet. I type in it whenever I think of something I want to remember. The first thing I ever wrote in it was this. The door closed. Mine is still open. If you're sitting somewhere tonight, feeling like there is no door left for you, like everyone who was supposed to hold space for you has quietly, or not so quietly, turned you away, I want you to hear me when I say, I know what that feels like. I know the specific weight of standing in the rain with everything you own in a bag that tears at the handle. And I also want you to hear this. That night was 14 months ago. My life looks nothing like it did. Not because I got lucky. Not because someone swooped in, but because I got up the next morning and I made one phone call, and the morning after that I made another one. That's all it is, in the end. One call, one step, one morning at a time until the life you're building starts to look like something real. It does. I promise you it does.